Hey there, and welcome to Authentically ADHD. I'm your host, Carmen, and I am so glad that you're here. This is a podcast where we get real about ADHD. No filters, no judgment, a safe space to explore and learn and grow. If you're here, it's because you want to take a deep dive into the world of ADHD, and trust me, we're going to have a lot of fun doing it. Now, you're probably wondering, why did I start this podcast? Well, in true ADHD fashion, it all started very impulsively. One day, I thought, I should start a podcast, especially with all this paperwork that I have and all these notes that I have trying to understand my own ADHD. And the next thing I knew, here I am, sharing thoughts with you. I don't know, 200, 100 episodes later? I don't know. I lose track of time. I'm time blind. Are you? Anyways, when you have ADHD, ideas come fast, and sometimes you just gotta roll with them. Honestly, this podcast was born out of my passion for understanding ADHD in a deeper way with the newest research. You see, pills don't teach skills. That's something I've learned over the years. Medication can help, and it's a great tool to use, but true growth, that comes from knowledge, understanding, and actionable skills. And so that's what I want to share with you. Research-backed insights, practical tips, and lived experiences of someone who's been there. Now, a little bit about me. I'm not just a host of this podcast. I'm also an early childhood special education teacher, which means I've spent years understanding how children learn, grow, and thrive in ways that work for them, especially when they're neurodiverse. And I'm also a certified life and performance coach, guiding people to unlock their full potential in both their personal and professional lives. But here's the thing that makes me a little different. I'm also a late diagnosed ADHDer. And on top of that, I self-identify as being on the autism spectrum. So when I talk about ADHD, it's not just from a professional perspective, it's from lived experience, because I get it. I know what it's like to feel like your brain is running at full speed while everyone else is moving at a different pace, and you have instructions that are in Japanese and upside down, and everybody else got them in their own language. Throughout this podcast, I'll share all kinds of insights about navigating life with ADHD, from the everyday struggles to the strengths that we can celebrate. We'll talk about everything from time management to relationships to self-advocacy, and all about how to live authentically in a world that often asks us to be anything but. Whether you have ADHD yourself or you want to understand it better, you are in the right place. So, let's get started. Hi, this is a disclaimer that I am a early childhood special education teacher. I am a certified life and performance coach, and I am a podcaster. All right, I am not a medical doctor, and none of this information should be used in supplement of a medical professional and or therapy. Hi there, my friend, and welcome back to another episode of Authentically ADHD. Now, we have some new listeners. We have gained listeners, friends. We have more people that are interested in being in this community. So what we're going to do is something I like to do every, maybe 50 episodes, and let's go a little bit back to the basics. Why? One, well, because we have a bunch of new listeners, and two, because I learn a lot of new things about things that I've already done, podcast episodes on, so they're not always going to be the same. So today, we are deep diving into a topic that's at the very heart of living with ADHD, and that's executive functions. Don't worry, this isn't a corporate meeting or a fancy business term lesson. We are talking about the brain's executive functions, basically the mental skills that act like the CEO or conductor of your brain, helping you get stuff done or not get stuff done, as the case may be. In this first part, we'll break down some of the executive functions and how they relate to ADHD with some relatable examples and a bit of scientific grounding, always sprinkled with humor. This is also a part 1 of a 2-part episode. I realized that it was going to be way too long, making it just one part. So here we go. What exactly are executive functions? In plain English, executive functions are the cognitive processes that help us plan, prioritize, and regulate our behaviors. Think of them as the brain's management system, or the tools your brain uses to execute tasks, hence the name. These include things like working memory, keeping information in your mind, inhibitory control, self-control or impulse control, flexible thinking, which is adapting to change or new information, planning, time management, and emotional self-regulation. If your brain was an orchestra, executive functions would be the conductor, making sure everyone plays in harmony and on time. For example, imagine you want to cook a meal. You need to plan what to cook, organize the ingredients, manage the time so nothing burns, remember the steps, working memory, and resist the temptation to, say, scroll on your phone and forget the stove is on. That's impulse control. All those mental juggling tasks and skills are executive functions at work. Now let's connect this to ADHD. Many of you probably already suspected the punchline. ADHD and executive functions are BFFs, bad faith friends. Just, made that up. Meaning ADHD often messes with these exact skills. Researchers describe ADHD as a developmental impairment of the executive functions. In fact, some experts even propose renaming ADHD to executive function disorder or executive function deficit disorder. Because nearly all the challenges of ADHD boil down to the problems with executive functions. Dr. Russell Barkley, a leading ADHD researcher, flat out states ADHD might as well be called executive function deficit disorder. How ADHD reveals itself through executive function. Let's unpack that with everyday examples, because theory is dry and our lives are anything but. People with ADHD often struggle to plan, organize, and complete tasks on time, and we misplace things. We get overwhelmed by big projects or prioritize the wrong tasks, not because we're lazy or careless, but because the mental secretary in our head, executive functioning, is taking an extended coffee break. If you had ADHD, any of these stories might sound familiar. The first one is a personal story. You may get up, get ready for work. You've planned your week. You have Wednesday off. It's Monday. You get ready. You do your morning routine. You're on time. You arrive to work. You say good morning, and then your assistant says to you, "Hi, I thought you were off today." Yes, this literally happened to me recently. It's summer now, so obviously it was a little bit ago, but yes, this happened to me. I walked into work, and that's what she said. I got the days mixed up, so much so that I planned Wednesday as a day off, and for my FMLA, for my things for work, and planned the wrong day. And I had a therapy appointment on Monday and everything. Some other things, so I turned around and I had to drive home and restructure my day, okay? So that involved a lot of executive functions like time management issues, then needing to use cognitive flexibility to shift. It's all of the things, right? So here is one about time management troubles. You intend to leave home by 8 a.m., but somehow it's 7:55 and you're still searching for your keys, which you swear you put down somewhere logical. This time blindness, or losing track of time, or underestimating how long things will take, is a classic sign of executive dysfunction. Then there's the working memory hiccups. You walk into a room with great purpose and immediately forget why you are there. Or someone gives you instructions and 2 minutes later, you've retained only the first and last things they said. That's your working memory, one of the executive functions, struggling to hold on to information as you use it. Organization and prioritization problems may lead to your desk or house or life looking like a tornado hit it. Papers everywhere, have finished products scattered about, or you have 10 urgent tasks, but you spend hours on a minor one because starting the big task feels impossible. Deciding what's important and keeping materials in order to do things later is another executive function, and it goes awry in ADHD. Impulse control and focus. Ever blurt out something and immediately think, why did I say that? Or find yourself scrolling Instagram instead of doing that report that's due in 2 hours? Inhibitory control or self-restraint is an executive function that helps us stay on track and think before acting. And ADHD weakens that brake pedal. We know what we're supposed to do, but doing it is another story. These day-to-day struggles illustrate how ADHD shows up as executive dysfunction. It's not that we don't understand what needs to be done. Often we know exactly what we need to do. It's that there's a disconnect between intention and action. As one ADHD expert put it, ADHD is a deficit in reliably converting intentions into actions. If you have ADHD, your brain manager might be inconsistent. Sometimes it's on point, like when your hyperfocus kicks in on something fascinating, and other times it's on an extended vacation when you need it most. The brain CEO, prefrontal cortex, and friends. Now, I can't talk about the executive functions without introducing the brain CEO, the prefrontal cortex. That's the front part of your brain right behind your forehead. It's in charge of many of the executive functions, basically the fancy office where the executive lives. When you engage in planning or resisting an impulse or juggling info in your head, your prefrontal cortex, PFC for short, is working hard. In many people with ADHD, this area tends to be underactive or develops more slowly compared to neurotypical folks. One famous study found that kids with ADHD, the PFC matures about 3 years later than other kids. No wonder those of us with ADHD often feel a few steps behind in managing adult tasks. Our brain CEO took a little bit longer to grow up. Besides the PFC, executive functions rely on a whole team of brain regions and brain networks. So we'll get more into the nitty-gritty neuroscience in part 2, but for now, know that ADHD it's not just not trying hard enough, okay? It's rooted in how our brains are literally wired. Brain scans and studies consistently show differences in the ADHD brain. Less activity in the executive regions during tasks, and even structural differences like slightly smaller or less active prefrontal cortex areas. ADHD brains also exhibit altered dopamine activity. Dopamine being a key neurotransmitter, the chemical messenger, that helps drive motivation, reward, and helps us keep attention. If the executive function is the boss, dopamine is the coffee that keeps the boss alert and working. In ADHD, the brain's coffee supply is kind of weak, leading to problems with keeping that executive function running efficiently. More on that soon. The executive functions that matter for ADHD. All right, so executive functions equal the brain's management system, and ADHD equals issues with those skills. So why is this such a big deal? Because the executive functions touch almost every aspect of our life. They help us do things like finish what we start. Without good executive function, we might lose our phone twice a day or forget appointments unless we set 10 reminders. It helps us regulate emotions. Yes, even how we manage our emotions ties in. Ever notice how little frustrations can turn into a huge deal? Ever wonder? And it will trigger a huge emotional reaction. That's partially your executive brain struggling to apply the brakes on that emotion. Emotional self-regulation is considered an executive function, and it's also inhibited. Executive functions also help us make decisions, from choosing what to eat for dinner to bigger life decisions like what car to buy or house to rent or whatever. All of these choices, we rely on planning ahead and weighing options, right? Executive processes that ADHD can derail, hello, analysis paralysis, or other impulsive decisions. In essence, executive function is the invisible hand guiding our daily activities. And ADHD is like a mischievous sprite pulling at that hand. And it's pulling it off course. It's important to stress, and I'll probably repeat this, that this is neurological. It's not a character flaw, and it is not something that is like a lack of willpower or that you're lazy. In fact, over a century ago, ADHD was actually cruelly labeled a deficit of moral control. Seriously, they thought kids who couldn't sit still just lacked morals. We know now that that's not true, and ADHD is a brain-based condition, not a moral failing. The executive function challenges are symptoms, not excuses, and understanding them is key to finding out how we can help, right? By recognizing ADHD as a largely an executive function disorder, we can better support ourselves and our loved ones. So instead of saying try harder, which is like saying let's find a charger, meaning let's put supports in to help the brain's executive system out. Coming up, we're going to get a little bit more sciencey, but don't worry, I will keep it digestible. We'll peek into the ADHD brain to see why these executive functions misfire, looking at the neuroscience and what it has to say about the prefrontal cortex, dopamine, and their neural circuits involved. This is where I'll channel my inner neuroscience geek, and trust me, it's fascinating stuff that really validates the struggles. So grab a coffee and let's dive in. So we're going to get into a little bit more of the brain science and the why, as in why does the ADHD brain struggle with these tasks? I know science can be dry, but stick with me. I promise to keep it conversational and relatable. That was me trying to put those two words together, I think. Maybe a nerdy joke here or there. After all, understanding the neuroscience can be incredibly validating, right? It can be incredibly validating. It shows us that ADHD isn't just in your head in the dismissive sense. It can literally in our brain wiring and chemistry. It's literally there. First of all, the prefrontal cortex. Let's start with Star Player Part 1. The prefrontal cortex, this brain region right behind your cortex, your forehead, I mean. It's like the HQ, the quarterback for executive functions, planning, decision-making, impulsive control, all that good stuff. In brains without ADHD, the PFC lights up to keep you on task and helps you use those executive functioning skills. In ADHD brains, imagine the lights are a bit dimmer or they flicker. Neuroimaging studies show that ADHD is associated with a weaker function and structure of the prefrontal cortex circuits, especially in the right hemisphere. There's often less activation in the PFC when a person with ADHD tries to concentrate or execute a task compared to a person without. It's like our brain's control center is running on low power mode all the time. What causes this? Partially it's developmental. As I mentioned, the PFC tends to mature later in ADHD. Think of it as a lag. By the time we are, say, 15, our executive function brain might resemble that of a 10 or 12-year-old in some ways. Russell Barkley quantifies this as about a 30% delay in executive function development, meaning an adult with ADHD could have the self-regulation skills you'd expect in someone a little younger. There's no shame here. It's an explanation that our brains are literally on a different timetable. No wonder we're time blind. Now, here, let's dive into a little bit more of the what, when, why, and who of task management. The what circuit runs from the PFC to a regional deep inside what's called the basal ganglia, specifically the striatum. This circuit helps with working memory and intentional action, basically holding all the information in your head and translating thoughts into actions. This circuit lags, so you get the classic I had a great idea but failed to act on it. The when circuit. This connects the PFC to the cerebellum, the back of your brain. The cerebellum isn't just for balance and coordination, which we can sometimes also lack. It deals with timing and sequencing of actions, and this is your brain's internal clock or lack thereof. The when circuit is off. You experience poor time management and timing. Hello, time blindness, and doing things either too early, too late, or in a weird order. The why circuit. This links the PFC through the midbrain, the anterior cingulate, to the amygdala and the limbic system. This is an emotional circuit. Think of motivation and emotional integration. It helps us decide what to do based on how we feel about it, the reward or emotional thing that we get after we do the thing. If this circuit is dysregulated, you might struggle with emotional regulation and finding motivation unless something is emotionally compelling. Sound familiar? Like only doing homework when it's interesting, or last-minute panic gives you emotional weight. Then there's the WHO circuit. Goes from the PFC to the back of the brain again, probably the parietal regions. And this one is with the self-awareness and self-monitoring, the ability to reflect on what you're doing and how you're doing, thinking about what you're thinking about. The glitchy WHO circuit could mean that you're a little bit, impulsive. You lack self-awareness in the moment. You don't notice when you're off track, being impulsive or emotionally dysregulated until after the fact. All 4 circuits typically involved in ADHD to varying degrees. Depending on the person, some circuits might be more impaired than others. This is why it's called a spectrum. For instance, one ADHDer might have huge issues with the time when circuit, but be okay with working memory, the what circuit, while another is just the opposite. But generally, ADHD impairs all these executive pathways to some extent. This is why it can affect so many areas of our life. These circuits together form what scientists call the executive control network, especially in the brain network that keeps you focused on task by connecting the PFC with other critical hubs in the brain. In ADHD, this network is a bit underpowered. Interestingly, brain scans also suggest ADHD brains have trouble logging between the task mode network and the default mode network. I've talked about this before, the brain's autopilot and daydreaming mode. Some data shows that people with ADHD stay in default mode, mind wandering, when they should switch on to task mode. It's like the brain's car is stuck in neutral when you need to shift to drive. If you've ever been reading a page and suddenly realize that you absorbed none of what you were reading because you were daydreaming, that's your default mode network sneaking in. Next up, we're going to talk all things dopamine, why we chase it, and then we're going to jump into a little more detail about these executive functions and living with them and the everyday struggles. First, a word from our sponsors. Hey there. If you're looking for a game changer in managing your ADHD, let me tell you about something that's made a huge impact on my life. Focused, the adult ADHD group coaching program by Kristen Carter. This isn't just another program. It's a community. It's a roadmap. It's a lifeline for adults with ADHD who want to thrive. Inside of Focus, you'll find weekly coaching calls with Kristen packed with actionable insights, a supportive community of adults who get it. They get what it's like to live with ADHD. You'll get tools and strategies that actually work for our brains. No fluff, just real results. I've been a part of Focused for over a year, and let me tell you, it's where I've learned so much of what I share with you on Authentically ADHD. It's been a game changer for me, and I think it could be for you too. And here's the best part. If you use my link to join, we both save money. It's a win-win. So if you've been looking for the right ADHD support, this is your sign to check it out. Head to the link in my show notes to learn more and sign up. Let's thrive together with tools and support that we need to succeed. Are you also loving what we're doing on Authentically ADHD but want to take your experience to the next level? Well, I have got something for you. Introducing the Authentically ADHD Patreon, your VIP pass to the ultimate ADHD support hub. As a Patreon member, you'll unlock exclusive perks like early access to every single episode, hear it before anyone else does, a treasure trove of resources that I've made, tools, guides, and worksheets to help you thrive in everyday aspects of life, direct coaching opportunities with me designed to help you harness your ADHD powers, and the cherry on top, an incredible community of like-minded individuals who just get it. You're not alone on this journey, and together we can be unstoppable. By joining Patreon, you're not just supporting the podcast, you're fueling a movement. Together, we're breaking stigmas, embracing authenticity, and creating a world where ADHD is seen as a strength and not just a struggle. So what are you waiting for? Head over to patreon.com/authenticallyADHD and join the family today. Let's keep growing, thriving, and showing up authentically together. Hope to see you over there. Back to the show. All right, let's now talk about the dopamine, the famous neurotransmitter, often dubbed the brain's pleasure or reward chemical. Dopamine is a critical player in ADHD. You'll hear it come up a lot because ADHD is linked to a dysregulated dopamine system. But what does that even mean? Picture dopamine as the fuel that motivates and rewards the brain for doing things. It's heavily involved in attention, pleasure, and reinforcement learning, so learning by reward. And in a typical brain, when you do something rewarding or even anticipate a reward, like thinking about the chocolate cake you're going to eat after finishing a task, dopamine levels rise in certain brain circuits, particularly the reward pathway, the one that's connected to the PFC and the ventral striatum I spoke about. This dopamine surge says, hey, this is important or fun, keep at it, and it helps the prefrontal cortex sustain effort because there is a payoff. In ADHD brains, the dopamine situation is often insufficient or irregular. Many people with ADHD have genetic differences affecting the dopamine neurotransporters or receptors. For example, some have variants of the dopamine transporter gene or receptor genes. Researchers have found that we just overall have lower baseline dopamine levels, weak dopamine signals for delayed rewards, now or not now approach to them instead of paycheck in 2 weeks type of rewards that are delayed. Why? Because reward is far off and our dopamine neurons go, meh, not feeling it. It's literally a delayed or blunted dopamine response for waiting. You can kind of blame anhedonia and alexithymia for this. And then there's the fast dopamine uptake. Some theorists, like the dopamine transporter hypothesis, suggest that dopamine transporters in ADHD might suck up the dopamine too quickly from the synapses. So think of it as having a vacuum that clears the dopamine before it fully does what it's supposed to do, leading to a shortage at the critical moment you need it. This dopamine imbalance contributes to many ADHD symptoms. Remember that inattention to action problem? Well, if doing the action doesn't give dopamine a reward, no anticipatory, anticipating the reward doesn't trigger any dopamine for you, the brain struggles to kick into gear. This is not laziness, it's chemistry. The motivation circuitry, the reward network in ADHD is understimulated by mundane tasks. That's why interesting or urgent tasks, which flood us with dopamine or adrenaline, are much easier. Our brain is finally getting the juice it needs. One might say an ADHD brain is actually starved for dopamine, which explains behaviors like novelty-seeking, risk-taking, or hyperfocus on things we love. We're subconsciously trying to pump up the dopamine. In fact, stimulant medication like methylphenidate or Ritalin or amphetamines like Adderall work by increasing dopamine and norepinephrine levels in the brain, especially in the prefrontal cortex. These meds block the dopamine transporter and encourage dopamine release, so more dopamine hangs around for a longer time. The result? The executive function circuits function better, attention improves, and it's easier to get things done because the brain's reward for doing things is restored. This is why about 80% of people who take medication for their ADHD find it effective. It's literally refueling the tank that was super low. Newer studies and neuroimaging also confirms this. After taking stimulant medication, people with ADHD showed increased activity in the prefrontal and executive areas of the brain in response to the medication. It boosted their neurotransmitters, making the brain more responsive and alert. And it's not just stimulants. Even the non-stimulant meds like atomoxetine or Strattera boost neurotransmitters. They boost norepinephrine and dopamine in certain regions to help executive functions. The other brain players are norepinephrine and neural harmony. While dopamine often steals the spotlight, we can't forget about norepinephrine. This is another neurotransmitter closely related to ADHD and adrenaline that is crucial for attention and executive function. Many ADHD medications also increase norepinephrine. If dopamine is the let's do this, it'll feel good chemical, norepinephrine is the pay attention, this is important chemical. ADHD involves deficits in both. Enhancing norepinephrine in the PFC improves signals for focus and reduced noise, which helps sustaining attention and working memory. So the meds that treat ADHD basically tweak both dopamine and norepinephrine in these frontal brain networks. There's also other evidence and other differences in other regions of the brain areas for ADHD. I don't want to bore you with too much science, so we're just going to go over them quickly. If you want to read more about it, or there's this cool feature on Substack where you can make it read it for you in a kind of AI voice. It'll be posted over there. I think it actually already is posted over there and has been for a while. But it's the frontostriatal circuits, the frontocerebellar circuits, and the limbic system. Basically, these all have to do with all of the different things we've already talked about as well. So, what's the point of all this? Overall brain volume in ADHD is slightly reduced on average, and certain things are smaller and tend to work different. This is all highly individual. The ADHD brain's like an orchestra that's missing the conductor, and he's like running around, the music's chaotic, and the conductor is napping. The violin is playing too soft, and some sections are coming in at the wrong time. Neuroscience has helped us to see that this chaos isn't because a person isn't trying or doesn't care. It's because the brain system that should be doing what it should be doing to bring order is underpowered. That was a lot of brain talk. If your eyes are glazing over, come on back to me, because now we're moving into the next part. We're going to talk about living with executive function. Welcome to the part of the podcast where theory meets reality. We're putting ourselves in the shoes, probably mismatched shoes, knowing us, of someone dealing with the executive dysfunction on a daily basis. If you have ADHD, you won't need to imagine this. You've lived it. And if you don't, these stories and examples will give you an insight into the often frustrating, sometimes comical ways that ADHD can throw wrenches into the simplest tasks. We'll discover common struggles like time blindness, working memory lapses, disorganization, emotional regulation issues, and more. Because this is authentically ADHD, we're going to expect a mix of frank honesty, humor, and the occasional mini rant about these challenges, okay? We're going to start with one of the most notorious ADHD quirks, time blindness. Time blindness is exactly what it sounds like. Just think about that for a sec. Time blindness is literally exactly what it sounds like. The time is it's an inability to see time accurately. It's like having a broken internal clock. I feel like I never developed one personally. One ADHD writer described it as feeling suspended in One ADHD writer described it as feeling suspended in eternal present. You know those sci-fi movies where someone is stuck in a time warp? Yeah, having ADHD can be a bit like that. So here's a real life scenario. I sit down to write a quick email at 10 a.m. I'm just gonna, fire off a response. Should take 5 minutes. Next thing I know, I look up and it's 11:30 a.m. Not only is the email still unwritten, but now I have 12 tabs open because I got sidetracked looking up vacation spots and watching a cooking video. Where did the time go? Or how about deciding on a short break by scrolling TikTok and then suddenly a whole hour evaporates? Whoops. People with ADHD routinely underestimate or lose track of how much time has passed. We also misjudge how much time things will take, so how much time we need. For instance, I might optimistically think I can shower, get dressed, walk the dog, and prep breakfast all in 30 minutes. Spoiler, I absolutely cannot. That takes about 3 hours. This leads to chronic lateness and last-minute scrambles, and it's not because we don't care about being on time. Our brain literally can't keep time well. One expert notes that people with ADHD consistently have challenges with perceiving time and sequencing events. So here's a metaphor. I often find time blindness to my friends. I often explain it like this. I have two modes, now and not now. If something isn't happening right now or due immediately, it kind of doesn't exist in my mind. Next week's deadline might be related to how ADHD brains handle reward and urgency, but without an immediate deadline or some emotional excitement, our brains don't release enough dopamine to kick in the when circuit into gear. As we discussed, no dopamine, no accurate sense of urgency, and that's why many of us become crisis-driven or chaos-like junkies. We joke that we work best under pressure, but really, it's the pressure, stress, adrenaline, and emotional intensity that finally gives our brain the neurotransmitters it's been lacking to feel time properly. Time blindness can be incredibly frustrating. It makes you feel unreliable, and other people might misinterpret this as you not valuing their time or being irresponsible. Believe me, we beat ourselves up over it plenty. I've had those mini rants myself. Why can't I just judge time like a normal person? But understanding that it's a genius, genuine, cognitive quirk. My brain's internal clock runs on a different speed, or I don't have an internal clock, helps you remove the shame. It's not a matter of discipline. It's a matter of finding workarounds like timers, clocks everywhere, things like that, which we'll get into during the coping strategies in part 2. Then there's the working memory woes, the leaky mental bucket. Next up, working memory problems. Another daily struggle of courtesy of ADHD working memory is your mental sticky note. It lets you hold information in mind and manipulate it for a short period of time. Now, for example, doing mental math or remembering a phone number long enough to dial it. In ADHD, that sticky note tends to lose its stickiness. We have what's akin to a leaky bucket memory. You pour information in and it starts dripping out unless you actively keep refilling it. Ever go to the grocery store for 3 items and come back with 2 because you totally forgot the third? And of course, it was the most important one. Or you're told 3 instructions. Email A, call B, then file C. You do A, get distracted, then an hour later you're like, wait, I know there's more I was supposed to do. Working memory failure. For students, it might be reading a passage and forgetting the beginning by the time they've reached the end. Or at work, trying to follow a multi-step process and losing track of which steps you've done. ADHD working memory deficits are well-documented tasks that measure working memory, like sequences of numbers or spatial locations. It translates into things like forgetting instructions almost as soon as you hear them unless you write them down. Losing your train of thought mid-conversation because something else grabbed your attention and poof, the original thought is gone. Or needing reminders for things that seem obvious, like I will literally forget to eat if I'm hyper-focused on something and I don't have a reminder or my stomach growls. One of my personal classic moves is opening multiple browser tabs to look up something, then forgetting why I opened up half of them. I click a link, scroll Twitter, or whatever it is. Someone texts me, I reply, and then I stare at the screen blankly like, well, what was I doing? It's literally like having too many apps running in the background and the working memory or the RAM overloads. And like it does that freezy buffering thing. Then there's organization and disorganization. Messy backpack, messy mind. Organization. The perpetual thorn in the ADHDer's side. Many of us live in a state of chronic disorganization. Our physical spaces might be cluttered, papers, items, all that strewn about, and our mental organization, like keeping track of deadlines, tasks, and commitments, is just as cluttered. When I was in school, my backpack and locker looked like a bomb went off. Crumpled papers, random doodles, yesterday's lunch, and at work, my desk accumulates piles of documents and sticky notes galore. I mask it a little bit there, but at home, it's definitely a mess. It's not that I like it to be messy, it's that tidying and maintaining order requires sustained executive function. You have to plan where things go, remember where to put them back, and regularly prune and file things. I hate filing and pruning. Basically, it's an ongoing process. With ADHD, by the time you consider cleaning up, you're already overwhelmed by the volume of stuff. And prioritizing what to do first can become a big puzzle. On the digital side, it can mean emotional inbox overflow, the thousands of unread emails because sorting through them is daunting. I really do, but then I get distracted. Pattern emerging. Missing appointments or deadlines, not because we don't care, but because without a robust reminder systems, an ADHD brain may not keep that date in mind. Our executive function isn't great at remembering to remember, a concept called prospective memory. Ever forget that you had a meeting until it was over? That's executive dysfunction playing hide and seek with your calendar. For me, a real low point was once I forgot to pay a bill for so long that the electricity shut off. I wasn't financially strapped at the time. I simply forgot. Out of sight, out of mind. And I kept procrastinating because I hated dealing with the paperwork. It was a big wake-up call that I needed better systems, not just good intentions. Organizing with ADHD is like herding cats. The moment that you end in one area, you get one area under control, another's running wild. Or like trying to keep my preschool classroom calm. Once I get one area calm, the other area is going crazy. You straighten up your room, but then your to-do list is in shambles. You organize your emails, but then you forget to check your calendar. We constantly drop the ball. That leads us right into, if that didn't make you feel emotionally dysregulated, I know it made me feel emotional regulation, that roller coaster ride. This one often surprises people who think ADHD is just about focus. Emotional dysregulation, many adults with ADHD will tell you that controlling their emotions, especially negative ones like frustration, anger, or feelings of rejection, is a big challenge. It's like our emotional volume knob is broken. Small annoyances can crank up to 11, and it can be hard to soothe ourselves back down. You're driving, and someone cuts you off. A typical person might honk or be annoyed for a minute. An ADHD person might go off into a full rage, heart pounding, maybe even yelling a string of colorful words with no one else in the car. Or conversely, you receive a mildly critical comment from your, boss, and internally it feels like the world is ending, and you spiral into shame and anger that is disproportionate to the comment. This is sometimes called rejection sensitivity, and in the ADHD community, it's an extreme emotional sensitivity to a perceived rejection or criticism. Not everyone with ADHD experiences this, but emotional impulsivity and sensitivity are very common. I recall an incident once where I spilled coffee all over my laptop. That's frustrating for anyone, but my reaction was a total meltdown. Tears, self-blame, and calling myself stupid. The works. It was an outsized reaction, and at the same time, I felt like I couldn't control it. It's as if the brain's emotional regulator, which should be telling me, okay, take a breath, this is fixable, was totally offline. Neurobiologically, our friend the Y circuit and the amygdala are involved. And so we aren't as effective at manipulating and regulating our emotions. It shows up as difficulty with motivation and mood. We might struggle with low frustration tolerance and mood shifting. We might struggle with task initiation. Getting started is very difficult. You know you need to do the thing, but you just can't. It's like there's a wall between you and the first step. Then there's task switching. Once you get going, switching to the next task is another hurdle. If I plan to spend 20 minutes on a task A and then move on to task B, chances are I'll hyper-focus on chance A for an hour or so. Conversely, jump to tasks C, D, and E because I got distracted. Following through on long-term goals, We start with great intentions, the New Year's resolutions, and the big projects or learning a new skill. Then, executive dysfunction derails the follow-through. Consistency is hard for ADHD folks. You might go for a week really strong and then lose momentum when the initial excitement fades off. Then there's mental fatigue and burnout. People forget that using executive functions when you have a deficit is extra effort. We can do a lot of what neurotypical people do, but it costs us more energy and more stress. That's why when people with ADHD feel chronically mentally fatigued, and why seemingly simple tasks like filling out a form or making a phone call can feel like climbing Mount Everest. It's not the task itself, it's the executive function overhead assisted with the task. Planning it, worrying about it, remembering it, etc. That's the part that drains us. It's a big reason ADHD can lead to burnout. Our brains are working overtime to do what others do with less effort. Often these struggles feed into one another. Disorganization can worsen time blindness, can't find the tools you need, wasting time, which increases stress, which makes emotional regulation harder, and then makes it even more difficult to focus, like a vicious cycle. Living with ADHD is like playing a game, and it's like the life game. It's like playing life on hard mode, but with no cheat codes. I remember one meme said that one time. However, I want to emphasize something. As challenges as these issues are, they are not because we lack intelligence or effort. ADHDers can be wildly creative, intelligent, hardworking. It's not just that our output is inconsistent due to these executive function hiccups. We can have brilliant moments of productivity and also days where we can't get off the couch and it feels impossible. I hope these scenarios make you nod in recognition or perhaps help you understand someone that's in your life you care about better. Maybe you're thinking, yes, that's exactly me. If so, you're not alone. And you're doing these things out of spite. You're not doing these things out of spite or laziness. And if you're someone who loves or works with an ADHDer, now you see that these behaviors, lateness, forgetfulness, and emotional outbursts are symptoms of a brain wiring difference. Now that we've laid out the struggles, you might wonder, but what exactly does ADHD, why does it cause all this? Is there any rhyme or reason? Now, we're going to do a little bit more brain science, but we're going to go from a scientific perspective of two experts, including insights from ADHD Unpacked, and we're going to see what they say about it for some extra aha moments. So there's attention, inhibition, emotion from ADHD Unpacked by Alex Connor and James Brown. They say in this book, we're going to start with a key insight from ADHD Unpacked. And essentially, it says that ADHD can essentially be boiled down to the problems with regulating three simple things: attention, inhibition, and emotion. They emphasize that ADHD is not literally a deficiency of attention. It's that we have no attention. It's that our attention, or it's not that we have no attention. It's that our attention is inconsistent and very hard to control. We have trouble directing where it needs to go and sustaining it. Hence distractibility and focus issues. But we can also hyperfocus intensely when something captures our interest. So it's better thought of as an attention regulation issue, not an absence of attention. So there's inhibition, our ability to pause and control our impulses, whether it's blurting out a thought, grabbing a cookie when we're on a diet, or clicking on a YouTube link instead of continuing to do your work. ADHD is characterized by a lack of ability to stop ourselves from being distracted or acting impulsively. This lack of inhibition is why hyperactivity and impulsively go hand in hand in the ADHD diagnosis. They both stem from weak impulse control, and if attention is like a wild horse, inhibition is the reins. And in ADHD, those reins are frayed. Finally, emotion regulation is the third pillar. As Connor and Brown note, emotional regulation difficulties are pretty much the universal problem for people with ADHD. We feel things strongly. We can struggle to modulate those feelings as a much more of a core feature of ADHD as the rest, even though historically it wasn't in the diagnostic criteria. So if you look at those three, attention, inhibition, emotion, you can already map them to the struggles that we already described in part 3. Attention dysregulation, issues focusing, sustaining effort, time blindness, because attention to time is poor. Inhibition dysregulation leads to impulsivity, distractibility, jumping tasks, blurting, difficulty following plans. And emotional dysregulation leads to mood swings, low frustration tolerance, rejection sensitivity, and mood issues, since motivation has an emotional component too. This trifecta gives a pretty good high-level explanation of ADHD behavior, and it also aligns with those brain circuits we talked about, the what, when, and who, and why circuits, and how it all relates to itself, self-monitoring, which is related to inhibition and awareness, and how all of those things are related. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of this episode. Part 2, we will continue going through, and then we will also be diving into coping strategies that you can use to help you live each day with your ADHD a little bit more authentically. Until then, stay authentic, and we will talk soon.